Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at financial decision making. And I have to say, what we found suggests that, well, maybe everything you thought you knew about money is wrong.
That's a bold way to start.
It is, because when people talk about succeeding in finance, they immediately jump to, math, modeling, spreadsheets, the hard stuff.
But the reality, and this is based on a ton of research and just looking at history, is that the key to sustained financial success, it's almost entirely psychological.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack that.
Exactly. To show you why success in this world is actually a soft skill, it's pure behavior, and how your own personal history is shaping your choices right now, probably without you even realizing it.
That's a huge claim, that math and intelligence are secondary to, feelings and behavior. So let's start right there. If financial success isn't about being rational, how much of it is actually driven by emotion?
You might want to sit down for this.
Uh-oh.
The data suggests that our financial decisions are driven by emotion and psychology. Something like 90% of the time. 90. Which leaves only about, 10% for that pure spreadsheet-style rational thought.
Wow. 90% emotional. That just flips the conventional wisdom completely on its head.
It really does.
So if we're mostly emotional beings when it comes to money, that means we are constantly wrestling with these biases that drive us to make bad choices. Or, maybe worse, drive us to just avoid it all.
That's the big one, avoidance.
So what are the major enemies we're fighting here?
Well, the research points to a few major emotional pitfalls. First up, you have fear. And its cousin, uncertainty.
Okay.
When you're faced with a market drop or, a stack of complex paperwork, these emotions, they just lead to total paralysis. We avoid opening the statements. We avoid making the tough calls.
And that just makes the problem worse later on.
It just compounds it.
I see that all the time. Fear makes you want to put your head in the sand. But I think anxiety is a slightly different beast. We call that paralysis by analysis, right?
That's the perfect term for it. Anxiety is when you're so overwhelmed by all the possible outcomes, the endless data points, that you just freeze up.
And you fall back on old habits.
Exactly. You end up relying on old, established habits, even if they're inefficient, because making a new, better decision just feels too risky or complicated.
And it's not just the underinformed who struggle with this. There's the total opposite problem, too. Overconfident.
Oh, that's a massive one. It's a huge bias, especially among, really successful or high-income individuals.
Why them specifically?
They believe that because they're an expert in one area, say business or tech, that they're somehow immune to market mistakes.
Ah, I see. So that overconfidence leads them to take on more risk.
Way more risk. And what's really worrying is that appetite for risk, it actually tends to increase as people get older and their income grows.
So your own intelligence can become a liability if it blinds you to a bit of humility.
You've got it.
Okay, so beyond that, what about the emotions that come from, comparing ourselves to others or just self-criticism?
Right. That brings us to the social emotions. You've got regret and shame.
Shame is a powerful one.
Huge. Embarrassment over your current situation, especially among younger adults, is a massive driver of avoidance. If you're ashamed of your debt or how little you've saved, you're not going to seek advice. You'll just stick to those bad habits because you want to keep it private.
And when that shame meets the outside world, that's when you get envy.
Exactly. You see the person next to you hitting these financial milestones, and you feel that pressure, that need to keep up.
The keeping up with the Joneses effect.
And that leads to lifestyle inflation that just destroys whatever mathematical plan you might have had.
All of this behavior, it just reinforces the central idea we're exploring today, doesn't it? That financial outcomes are fundamentally about how you behave, not what you know.
That's the critical separation. We're taught finance like it's a physics course full of these rigid, immutable rules and formulas.
But all the evidence shows it should be approached more like, like psychology, where emotion and context and nuance are king.
Absolutely. And the best illustration of this is just the wild difference you see between real-world financial success stories. If it were a hard science, the most technically brilliant people would always win, but they don't.
Which brings us to the two men we analyzed.
The genius executive and the humble janitor.
Let's start with the genius executive, Richard Fuscone. This was a man of immense technical skill. Harvard-educated, a top Merrill Lynch executive. He was even responsible for pioneering some of the components in Wi-Fi routers.
A legitimate genius. But his relationship with money was described by people who knew him as this unstable mix of deep insecurity and, frankly, childish stupidity.
He had to physically show his wealth.
Yes, we heard these stories of him carrying around a thick stack of $100 bills, just showing them off, bragging loudly about his net worth, especially when he was drinking.
So extreme technical intelligence on one side.
And just disastrous emotional behavior on the other.
Okay, now contrast that with Ronald Reed, the humble janitor.
A total opposite. He spent 25 years fixing cars, and then another 17 years sweeping floors at a JCPenney. Lived in a small two-bedroom house his entire life. He was the definition of low-key.
But when he passed away in 2014,
his estate was found to have a net worth of over $8 million.
$8 million? How?
He left the vast majority, $6 million, to his local hospital and library. And he did it by just saving consistently, investing in basic blue-chip stocks, and then exercising incredible patience for decades while these tiny sums compounded.
And the timeline here is what's truly unbelievable. Richard Fuscone, the Harvard executive, the one lauded for his judgment. He lost his massive Greenwich mansion in a foreclosure auction just 5 months before Ronald Reed, the janitor, left his fortune to charity.
And that's the pivotal lesson right there. The fact that these two outcomes can exist at the same time proves financial results do not come from a formula.
It's all behavior.
It's all behavior. The patience, the discipline, the frugality, the soft skills that Reed showed, they completely eclipsed the high intelligence and, frankly, the greed and recklessness of Fuscone.
So if behavior is the master, then our own behavior must be deeply rooted in our personal history.
Of course.
Which means what seems like a totally reasonable decision to one person might look completely insane to another. And it's all based on experiences that were, completely outside of our control.
Exactly. We are all anchored to the economic conditions we lived through in our formative years, our teens and our 20s. And this creates radically different worldviews.
Okay, give us an example of that. What about how people view the stock market?
Perfect example. Take someone who was born in, say, 1970. During their crucial early earning and investing years, they watched the S&P 500 increase almost tenfold.
Wow.
Even adjusted for inflation. So to them, the stock market is this powerful, reliable, wealth-generating machine. Risk is worth taking because the reward is massive and feels almost guaranteed over time.
But then you take someone born just 20 years earlier, in 1950.
They saw something wildly different. During their teens and 20s, again, adjusted for inflation, the market literally went nowhere.
Just stagnant.
Decades of stagnation. So their foundational view of stocks is skepticism. The risk doesn't seem worth the tiny return they saw firsthand.
You see the same kind of anchoring with inflation, right?
Oh, absolutely. Someone who was a teenager in 1960, they saw inflation triple prices during their youth. They remember high interest rates, they remember the gas lines, they view the stability of money as something fragile.
Whereas someone like me, born in 1990, has only ever experienced sustained low inflation.
For your entire life. So
Yeah.
You've never known a time when money wasn't stable. Your trust in currency, in the government's ability to manage prices, it's inherently much higher.
So we have these two equally powerful but totally opposite sets of experiences that are shaping our financial decisions today.
And this helps us understand choices that might seem totally irrational to an outsider, especially when it comes to risk. The data on lottery spending is a perfect case study for this.
Right. We know that the lowest income households in the U.S. spend an average of $412 a year on lottery tickets.
Which is 4 times the amount spent by the highest earners.
And if you're struggling mathematically, that $400 should obviously go toward rent or savings. So why do they spend it?
Because for them, saving a few dollars here and there feels pointless. The goal of real financial stability feels impossibly far away.
So the lottery ticket isn't an investment.
It's not an investment strategy. They are buying a ticket to hold a tangible dream. For many, it's the only time they can genuinely visualize getting the good stuff that other people take for granted.
So their decision, while it might be mathematically unsound, it's psychologically persuasive within their own anchored worldview.
Right.
It's reasonable, even if it's not rational.
That's a critical distinction. Reasonable versus rational.
And that distinction leads us to redefine what the true goal of financial management even is.
Because once you move past just maximizing capital for its own sake, you realize the highest dividend money truly pays is control over your time.
Control over your time.
The goal shifts. It's no longer about getting the biggest number. It's about maximizing your independence and your autonomy.
That's the definition of real wealth, isn't it? that independence is a far more dependable predictor of your overall well-being than just having a high salary or a huge house.
But we're constantly fighting that urge, right? The urge to spend money to signal success to other people.
Which brings us to the man in the car paradox.
I love this one. It just perfectly skewers our consumer spending habits. People buy expensive, flashy things, a Ferrari, a yacht, because they believe those things will make other people respect and admire them.
But here's the paradox. When I see that Ferrari drive by, I'm almost never thinking, wow, that driver is so cool. I'm only impressed with the car itself. My mind immediately jumps to, wow, I would look good driving that. The person bought the item to get admiration, but the admiration is only directed at the object, not the owner.
So the driver sought respect, but only generated envy. And that highlights the really crucial difference between being rich and being wealthy.
Okay, how do you separate those two?
Richness is easy to see. It's high current income or high current spending. The person driving that sports car or wearing expensive clothes is rich.
Okay.
Wealthy is what you don't spend. Wealth is the accumulation of assets you haven't spent. It's hidden. It's what you don't see.
So by that definition, the only way to become wealthy is to master that soft skill of not spending the money you already have.
Exactly. It reframes high savings and frugality not as a sign of being poor, but as a deliberate choice, a mechanism for gaining control and independence no matter what your income is.
And that deliberate control is what lets you unlock the single most powerful force in finance. We talk about compounding all the time, but the key factor that most people miss isn't the rate of return. It's time.
Time is everything.
Just look at Warren Buffett. His success isn't just because he's a genius stock picker, it's sheer longevity. Of his massive net worth, a staggering $81.5 billion was accumulated after he qualified for Social Security.
Think about that. The secret isn't genius, it's endurance.
And endurance requires one thing above all else.
Survival. You have to avoid ruin. You have to stay in the game.
Which brings us to this critical concept of having room for error, a margin of safety.
You must have enough of a buffer, a robust financial safety net to withstand the inevitable swings of bad luck. Otherwise, you're just thrown out of the game completely.
The analogy of the card counter is perfect for this.
It is. Even if you have a slight mathematical edge, say a 2% advantage, if you bet too heavily and the casino wins its 49% of the time, you could lose so much in the short term that your bankroll is wiped out.
And your edge means nothing because you can't play anymore.
You have to survive the chaos to capture the long-term edge. If you are relying on everything going perfectly, you're taking an irresponsible risk because reality never goes perfectly.
And speaking of chaos, we have to talk about market volatility. That constant uncertainty, that fear and doubt we feel when stocks drop, that isn't a malfunction of the system. That is the price you pay for market returns.
We have to fundamentally rethink how we look at market downturns. I mean, since 1950, the Dow Jones has been below its previous all-time high 92% of the time.
92%. So volatility is the normal state.
Which is the permanent state.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Yeah.
We need to view these inevitable downturns as a fee, not a fine.
That's the key. A fee is a cost of admission. It's something you pay that's worth paying for something valuable. It's the entrance price to the game.
Whereas a fine is a penalty, something you have to avoid at all costs.
And trying to avoid the fee by, timing the market or hiding on the sidelines often results in you paying double. You end up underperforming a simple, consistent buy and hold strategy. You just have to accept that volatility is the required payment to get those long-term returns.
Ultimately, the core lesson here seems to be that our financial decisions should prioritize being reasonable over being strictly rational.
A rational strategy looks amazing on a spreadsheet, right? It maximizes every single penny. But a reasonable strategy is the one that actually maximizes your endurance.
One that minimizes your fear.
And ensures you get the best night's sleep. That's the one you'll stick with.
And that endurance is the biggest practical challenge of all because, because we're constantly changing as people.
The research on this is fascinating. It points to something called the end of history illusion.
Which is the idea that we consistently underestimate how much our values, our goals, our desires, how much they're all going to change in the future.
We think our current self is the final version.
Right. Which means the plan we set at age 25 for our 50-year-old self is pretty likely to make that 50-year-old self miserable.
And this is exactly why extreme financial decisions, chasing a massive income at the expense of family time, or enforcing some extreme repressive frugality are the most likely to lead to regret down the road.
So success requires sticking to a plan for decades, but you are guaranteed to change who you are.
Which raises a critical, final question for you to think about. If compounding works best when you stick to a plan for decades and you're guaranteed to change your goals, what is the single most valuable financial asset you can acquire today to protect your future self from your current self's choices?
The freedom to change your mind without financial ruin. That flexibility.
That's it. That flexibility, which is provided by low debt and ample savings that aren't earmarked for anything specific, that is the real superpower.
It lets you pivot your life. It lets you abandon an obsolete plan without shame and chase new goals when your future self decides it's time for a change.
And that independence,
Yeah.
that is truly priceless.